Double Dragon. That classic 1987 side-scrolling beat-em-up everyone was familiar with, and if not, it was the one that looked like this. Anyway, this got popular for some reason. And when something gets popular, it usually gets ported over to a billion home video game formats, and here's one of them. Double Dragon, released in 1989 for the Sega Master System, and this is a straight-up arcade conversion as opposed to the NES version, which did its own thing more or less, and is not what would one consider arcade accurate. Double Dragon on the Master System also sports a feature that the NES game lacks, which happens to be two-player simultaneous action, which would make the Master System version the superior 8-bit title by that proxy alone. Not that it really means anything, but we shall press on. Anyway, a refresher for those unfamiliar with Double Dragon. Girl gets punched in the belly and taken captive, and so it's up to twin martial artists, the Hammer Billy Lee and Jimmy Spike Lee, to save said girl by beating up a bunch of bad guys across 4 locations, mostly comprising going to the right and beating people up, or at least try to, because the collision detection tends to be very spotty. Control is a simplified 2-button setup, one punches, the other kicks, and pressing both makes you jump. There's a variety of other moves. The only one that most seem to care about is the elbow smash, and that's fairly easy to pull off at times. I mean, honestly, in terms of overall control and response time, it's actually pretty solid. Trying to pull off specific moves might be a bit of an issue at times, but it's no worse than some other versions of the game that I've played. Really, one of the issues with this version of Double Dragon really falls on balance, as enemies seem a bit overpowered compared to the arcade version, and also has a tendency to gang up on you more often than not, which of course is the very nature of these sorts of games. It's all about crowd control, but they do so more easily here despite the numbers being lesser here than in the arcade original. Collision detection also has a tendency to be a bit spotty at times, more often than not giving the advantage to your opposition. I wouldn't call it completely broken or anything like that. It's a game that's still somewhat playable, but it's one of those things that makes Double Dragon a generally tougher game than it really should be. The game does offer continues, perhaps way too many, almost unlimited, I guess. That is until you reach the 4th and final mission, in which losing your last life means a game over. Yeah, that's the part I'm not all that clear on, but that tends to be the gist of it. Pretty much, I guess. For what it's worth, Double Dragon doesn't look half bad on the Master System. Some of the sprites are basically taken from the NES version, such as the stubbier Abobo sprite rather than the leaner arcade Bobo, but they look fine for the most part, aside from some odd color choices here and there, particularly with the Lee brothers and their hair, but the level layouts look fairly decent. The heads-up display is nice and clean looking. The only thing that really hampers this version on the visual front is the excessive amount of flicker and the occasional slowdown, but otherwise it looks fine for better or worse. I mean, the flicker and the slowdown is really the only real hurdles to overcome, but if you could get past that, it looks fine. Sound-wise, it's pretty good as well. The arcade tracks are all present and accounted for. They sound pretty damn good on the stock Master System sound processing gimmick that I am usually not fond of, but they nailed it here. Well, except for the sound effects, those are rather lame sounding, but no other complaints otherwise. Double Dragon is one of those games compatible with the FM sound unit, which is an expansion module for the Master System or the Mark III or whatever, one of those two, that enhances the music somewhat. It's supposed to sound better, but I wouldn't know because I don't have a sound unit and they only released it in Japan, and I ain't modding shit, so yeah. Overall, Double Dragon for the Sega Master System is what I would consider a pretty respectable conversion of the arcade game. It's not perfect. There's some quirks that keep it from being a top-notch port, but it does get the job done, and it also has the 2-player co-op that the NES version lacks. All things considered, it's a perfectly passable iteration of an arcade legend, and a worthwhile addition to any Master System library. Double Dragon's the only game in the series to grace the Master System, but don't worry, they made some other Double Dragon stuff for the other Sega's thing that we're going to look at soon enough, I guess. Have fun, kids.